Please welcome Richard Dean Anderson.
Richard Dean Anderson was once one of television's most recognizable faces. From the ingenious gadget-making hero MacGyver in the 1980s to the commanding presence of Colonel Jack O'Neill in Stargate SG-1, Anderson built a career that spanned decades and attracted a devoted global fan base. His characters weren't just roles, they became cultural icons. Generations grew up watching him escape danger with nothing more than a paperclip, or lead humanity against intergalactic threats with grit and humor. And then, suddenly he was gone. By the early 2000s, Anderson had seemingly stepped away from the Hollywood spotlight at the height of his popularity. For fans, the disappearance was puzzling. Why would a star with such a powerful career trajectory simply vanish from the industry he helped define? Rumors swirled. Was it burnout, creative disagreements, or something more personal? The truth, as it turns out, is far more complex and far more human. Richard Dean Anderson's decision to retreat from the limelight wasn't about fading relevance or scandal. It was about priorities. Hollywood often demands sacrifice, and Anderson reached a point where he could no longer ignore what mattered most. His story reveals the hidden cost of fame, the challenges of balancing family with stardom, and the quiet resilience it takes to walk away from success on your own terms. This is the real reason Richard Dean Anderson vanished from Hollywood, and it's a story that proves sometimes the bravest are. When Richard Dean Anderson first appeared on television screens in the early 1980s, few could have predicted just how much of a cultural impact he would have. Born in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1950, Anderson was not the typical Hollywood outsider who dreamed of stardom from childhood. His early years were defined by curiosity, adventure, and a love for the arts. As a young man, he pursued music, playing in bands and dreaming of becoming a professional hockey player before a broken arm ended that ambition. The setback could have been crushing, but for Anderson, it was the beginning of an entirely different path. His natural charisma and athletic build caught the attention of casting directors, leading to small television roles. But his first big break came in the early 1980s when he was cast in the medical drama 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. While the show didn't last long, it gave Anderson the exposure he needed to land bigger opportunities. The real turning point came in 1985 when he was cast as the lead in MacGyver. The series was unlike anything else on television at the time. Anderson's character, Angus MacGyver, was no typical action hero. Instead of relying on guns or brute strength, MacGyver used science, creativity, and everyday objects to solve problems and escape danger. Armed with a Swiss Army knife, duct tape, and boundless ingenuity, MacGyver became a symbol of intelligence over violence. The show's unique premise and Anderson's natural charm made it a worldwide sensation, running for 7 seasons and spawning 2 television movies. Anderson's performance made him a household name. Kids idolized MacGyver's cleverness, and parents appreciated the show's emphasis on brains rather than brawn. But what truly set Anderson apart was his ability to balance action with humanity. His MacGyver wasn't just a genius problem solver, he was also compassionate, often going out of his way to help those in need. It was a role that resonated deeply with audiences and cemented Anderson's place in television history. After MacGyver, Anderson could have easily coasted on the show's success, but he sought to avoid being typecast. He took on a variety of roles, from television movies to producing projects behind the scenes. Yet it wasn't long before another career-defining role came his way. Colonel Jack O'Neill in Stargate SG-1, premiering in 1997, Stargate SG-1 expanded on the cult classic film Stargate and became one of the longest-running science fiction series in history. As O'Neill, Anderson showcased a different side of his talent. The character was witty, sarcastic, and battle-hardened, a sharp contrast to the ever-resourceful MacGyver. Fans embraced him all over again, and the series cemented his reputation as not just a TV star, but a sci-fi icon. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Richard Dean Anderson had achieved something rare in Hollywood. Not one, but 2 legendary roles beloved by entirely different audiences. He was at the height of his career, a regular presence on magazine covers, convention stages, and television screens around the globe. Yet even as his fame grew, Anderson began to feel the quiet pull of something outside of Hollywood. While audiences saw a man at the peak of his career, he was already beginning to question what it was all worth and whether the sacrifices it demanded were too high. All an actor can play is simply being himself. By the early 2000s, Richard Dean Anderson had achieved a level of success most actors could only dream of. With MacGyver and Stargate SG-1, he had become not just a star but a cultural icon. Yet behind the cameras, the demanding schedule of Hollywood was starting to take its toll. Working on Stargate SG-1 was grueling. Episodes were shot on tight schedules, often requiring long days filled with physically demanding stunts and emotional performances. Anderson, who was also a producer on the show, carried the weight of multiple responsibilities. While he was proud of the series, the constant pressure left little time for anything else. Unlike many of his peers, who thrived on the Hollywood lifestyle, Anderson began to feel a growing sense of restlessness. What many fans didn't realize at the time was that Anderson had begun reevaluating his priorities. In 1998, his daughter Wiley was born and everything changed. Becoming a father gave him a new perspective on life and success. The long hours on set, the endless cycles of promotion, and the constant public attention suddenly seemed far less important when compared to being present in his daughter's life. Anderson himself admitted in interviews that his focus shifted almost overnight. He wanted to be a hands-on parent rather than a distant Hollywood figure. This personal transformation clashed with the demands of his career. The entertainment industry often expects total devotion, but Anderson wasn't willing to sacrifice his family life for fame. He began cutting back his workload, appearing in fewer episodes of Stargate SG-1 as the seasons progressed. Eventually, he stepped away from the show altogether, despite its continued popularity. For many fans, his departure was a shock, but for Anderson, it was a necessary decision. Beyond the personal reasons, Anderson also grew disenchanted with Hollywood itself. The constant spotlight, the expectations, and the relentless pursuit of ratings and profits left him weary. He had always been a private person, more comfortable outdoors than at red carpet events. In fact, his love for nature and adventure never left him. Long before acting, he had dreamed of traveling and exploring. And once he stepped away from the industry, he finally had the chance to embrace that lifestyle again. Anderson devoted much of his time to environmental causes and outdoor activities. He became an advocate for water preservation and partnered with organizations dedicated to protecting natural resources. These passions were far removed from the sound stages of Hollywood, but they reflected who he truly was, not just a performer, but a man who valued simplicity and purpose over glitz and glamour. The decision to leave Hollywood also meant stepping away from the endless cycle of interviews, conventions, and public appearances. While he occasionally returned for special projects, such as cameo appearances or reunion events, Anderson made it clear that he had no interest in chasing fame again. To him, success wasn't measured by how many shows he starred in, but by the quality of life he could provide for himself and his daughter. Fans often wondered if he regretted walking away, but Anderson's rare comments suggested otherwise. He seemed content with his choice, embracing the slower pace of life and the freedom to focus on what truly mattered. Still, his departure left a noticeable void in Hollywood. At a time when reboots and nostalgia-driven projects were on the rise, many hoped he would return as MacGyver or Colonel O'Neill. But Anderson remained firm in his decision to prioritize his private world over the demands of stardom. In the end, the real reason Richard Dean Anderson vanished from Hollywood wasn't a scandal. Career failure or lack of opportunity, it was a deliberate choice. He chose family over fame, peace over pressure, and authenticity over applause. And while fans may still miss seeing him on screen, his story stands as a reminder that even in Hollywood, sometimes the bravest role an actor can play is the one away from the cameras. After stepping away from the relentless pace of Hollywood, Richard Dean Anderson found himself in a place many celebrities never reach: peace. While some actors struggle with the sudden lack of cameras, scripts, and attention, Anderson embraced the quiet. His decision wasn't about turning his back on fans, but about rediscovering who he was outside the glow of stardom. For Anderson, family became the heart of everything. His daughter, Wiley, was growing up quickly, and he didn't want to miss a moment. Where once his days had been filled with long production schedules and late-night edits, his time was now spent on simple joys, school events, outdoor activities, and just being present. Friends of Anderson have said he loved the fact that his daughter knew him as Dad rather than as MacGyver or Colonel O'Neill. To him, that was the greatest achievement of all. Outside of family, Anderson leaned into his lifelong passion for the outdoors. Long before acting, he had dreamed of being an adventurer, even once considering becoming a professional hockey player before an injury changed his course. That love for physical challenges never faded. In his post-Hollywood life, he spent time traveling, cycling, kayaking, and connecting with nature. His interest in environmental activism grew stronger as well. He became involved in various causes dedicated to protecting wildlife and preserving clean water, using his fame not for self-promotion, but for something he believed could truly make a difference. While some actors fade completely from public memory after leaving the screen, Anderson's legacy remained surprisingly strong. Reruns of MacGyver continued to air around the world, and Stargate SG-1 developed a cult following that only grew after its original run. His characters remained beloved, and fans often expressed their hope for a comeback. Anderson occasionally indulged them with rare appearances at conventions or interviews, though these moments were infrequent. When he did show up, fans noticed he had aged naturally, never chasing the polished Hollywood image. He appeared comfortable in his skin, grayer, softer around the edges, but content. Hollywood, of course, didn't forget about him. Producers approached Anderson multiple times about reboots, sequels, or guest appearances. The most notable was the 2016 MacGyver reboot, which reimagined the character with a younger actor. Many fans expected Anderson to make a cameo, but he declined. He later explained that while he appreciated the character's place in pop culture, he had no desire to return to the fast-paced grind of weekly television. To him, the reboot was Hollywood's story, not his. Anderson's retreat also highlighted how unusual his path was. Many stars who walk away often do so after scandal or failure, but Anderson's exit was different. He left at the height of respect, with his shows still popular and his reputation intact. It wasn't Hollywood rejecting him. It was Anderson rejecting the parts of Hollywood that no longer fit the life he wanted. Even though he largely avoided the limelight, Anderson remained grateful for the fans who supported him throughout his career. He occasionally engaged with them through online fan communities, offering brief updates or messages. These glimpses into his private life reassured fans that while he was no longer a constant presence on screen, he was happy, healthy, and exactly where he wanted to be. For Richard Dean Anderson, life beyond the spotlight was never about disappearing. It was about redefining what mattered most. He traded red carpets for quiet mornings, endless scripts for conversations with his daughter, and public applause for the serenity of nature. And while Hollywood may still wish for his return, Anderson has made peace with the choice that gave him freedom.